I mean, like, that's just another way of maybe decolonizing and reimagining even what customer service looks like. Customer service doesn't have to look like you putting on a mask and jumping up and down because the client said so. Customer service can also be you providing care to a person, you know, being mindful of their needs, being mindful of their boundaries, being mindful of their body, and still, you know, having your own space to be human.
What's up, y'all? Welcome to The Teardown, a podcast hosted by me, Vegas Inc., your favorite polarizing tattooer. Every episode, I sit down and chat with amazing guest artists, and we dive in more intimately on the politics of the tattoo industry, as well as some topics I feel are more relevant in contemporary tattooing. So, now that we're all set up, let's get started. Are you ready? Our guest today is an incredible artist and tattooer, as well as a professional tarot reader, a practice she integrates into her tattooing, which is very exciting and very cool. She is the co-owner of the Rose Underground Tattoo Studio, aka Tru Tattoo Studio, alongside with myself, a space housing many dope BIPOC, queer, and trans tattooers. I refer to her as the Guyanese Snow White, as she spends time growing roses and being such a light in whatever space she enters. My friend and business partner, Sam Daveena, and I can think of no better person to explore this topic with. Hey, Sam.
Hey,
how's it going?
Going good. We had a really interesting day here at the shop today. It was a full house, and I feel like it's going to be that way going forward.
How are you feeling today?
At this moment, I'm feeling a little chilly.
Yeah, we were just talking about a draft, and
I'm going to be a little honest. I'm feeling a little chilly. I'm feeling a little nervous to be interviewed.
Think of this as a chat, shop talk.
Okay.
You know, as we do here. Today was nice. It was nice, like just having most of the artists here and then the guest artist that was here. I felt like, I don't know, things are moving. They're moving and shaking, and the vibes and energy is just so, it's like nice being in the space. I feel like just like engaging in like not only tattoo conversations, but just like everyday conversation. I don't know. Music is playing. We got Palo Santos burning and incense. You're making tea every 10 minutes and your hot water. It was chill.
Yeah. And it feels alive. It feels very like full of life.
Yeah, that's actually a really great way to describe it. It's exactly what it feels like. So tell me a bit about your experience in the industry. Like, how long have you been tattooing for? Like, how did you get your start? What sort of like got you into either apprenticing or however you started?
So I feel like every single time I answer this question, I have to double check my timelines. But at some time around 2016 to 2017, I got the inkling that tattooing was my next adventure. I was working mostly as a doula at the time that I decided to make that transition. And that was actually part of the inspiration for why I decided to start tattooing. So,
like birthing doula?
Yeah, in labor and delivery. And those types of techniques that kind of helped me to understand pain management, understand the ways that we perceive pain and the things that can help us to cope, but also to endure high stress situations. That's what kind of, I guess, turned my eye to tattooing. And it was in a situation where I was helping, you know, utilizing my doula skills to guide a friend through a painful tattoo experience.
I was going to ask because I don't think at that point, did you have any tattoos?
At that point, I didn't have tattoos.
But you saw like the connection.
I saw the connection. And of course, I was always an artist. I was always a visual artist. And I saw the connection and the magic in the ways that we can kind of like literally break into the body when we're breaking skin and like merge the art with the body. And I really saw the connections between that and the birthing process that I was very familiar with at the time.
I've never asked you this question before, but now I'm like, wait, what kind of like art were you doing at the time? Like, what would you say was the things that interest you? Like, do you have like an art?
At the time, I think like I had never really taken my art like seriously. Like I was never I never considered myself a professional artist until I started tattooing. At the time, organic, like hand-drawn mandala patterns were a very big part of my meditative practice. So just kind of like zoning out, and then the repetitive patterns, the intricacy, the detail, and I guess like, I don't know, the focus that went into it was part of my practice. And it was also kind of art at the same time. But that's what I was mostly doing at the time that I started practicing or learning to tattoo.
And when you like made that discovery, which is just like, I completely agree with all those sentiments. And I feel like when I like see you practice, like and how you engage with your clients, there's so much of that intentionality with them, like from the moment they come in like doing their design and like final touches to like doing placements, like everything. I feel like with you and your clients, and I think that, you know, as tattooers, we all try to do this, but there's like a really specific intentionality that I bear witness to, where you're just like, you explain every process. It's like everything that's going to happen, like they're fully informed. You give them their options. You ask what they are comfortable with, what they're not comfortable with. I see you like even come up with like coping mechanisms and like things, and we'll get into this in the podcast, but even like things on like how to help ground them if they're feeling a little bit more activated during an appointment. Is that like all that's sort of training that came in from being a doula, or is that like some intentionality?
There's a lot of it that did come with me in my tool belt from my previous types of work, but there's a lot that I had to discover that was very specific to tattooing. I'm sure it can relate to other very stressful or high pain situations, but some of it was very specific to tattooing.
So your practice, can you talk a little bit about, for like folks who don't know, the sort of work that you do? Because the type of work that you do is like super unique in that you do tarot and do a reading, and then you do a tattoo. That, I'm putting it so simply, but can you explain a little bit about what that practice looks like, and then also what got you into doing that specifically?
So when someone books in with me, first thing is that they usually get 2 appointments. The first appointment with me is our tarot session. Sometimes my clients opt not to have a tarot session and we do conventional tattoo consultations. But most of the time I am reading tarot for my clients when I'm doing custom work. So we sit down, we have about an hour and a half consultation time. And
whoa, I keep my shit down to 15 minutes.
Yes, I am taking time. I'm taking time. And during that time, I feel like I get a really good idea of who the person is that I'm creating work for. And the work and the design that comes forward is very much a product of that relationship between me and the client. Although it's my art, I always tell them, I'm like, I couldn't have done this without you and like the energy that you brought to the table. So during that session, we sit down, we might talk a little bit about what, you know, preconceived ideas they might already have for their tattoo, which I absolutely don't mind working into the process. And then we get right into the reading. And during the reading, a lot of times we uncover themes, thematic patterns in their life. We talk a lot about archetypal patterns. We might also talk about areas that they're really focused on right now. So things that are pressing or at the forefront of their mind that might also influence the way that they describe this milestone in their life and the way we might illustrate it together. So after the reading is done, we talk technical details. So we talk, you know, placement, sizing, you know, stylistic aspects and things like that. And then I take all of that information with me and I sit with it for a little while. So the time period between my consultations and my tattoo appointments are usually about 2 weeks, if not in some cases a little more. And I usually sit in meditation and just kind of like have all of that information spread out in front of me. I have my notes. I have a photo of the tarot spread and I just open myself up and see what comes through.
A state of meditation, like what does that mean? And like, what does that look like?
Usually it's just me sitting quietly in my house with my dog at my desk, candles lit. Cheetah. Sometimes I honestly, and I know this is like really cliche, but I sometimes will like take a look at all of the information that I need. So again, I usually take photos of my spreads so I have it in my mind, and I jump in the shower sometimes and I come up with my designs while I'm just standing under the shower, in the bath. But usually one of those two places, either in my bathroom or in my office, is where I do my design work. And then if I'm in the shower, I just come out and like jot it down on a piece of paper and then start designing it in Procreate.
I feel like that's a lot of showers.
I do shower sometimes twice a day. Yeah.
Jeez. What got you into doing that specifically?
It honestly seemed like a no-brainer for me. Like, I had been reading tarot at that point for many, many years already, and reading professionally, however, not at the capacity that I'm now. And it seemed, I couldn't imagine not doing it that way.
Since we're talking tarot, what card most speaks to you? Or like, what's your favorite card?
Okay, the card that speaks to me most changes a lot, right? And it changes with the season and whatever phases and chapters and things that I'm going through. But the card that stands out most to me for personal significance, for some reason, is the Nine of Pentacles.
What's the Nine of Pentacles?
Love the Nine of Pentacles. The Nine of Pentacles in my deck, and I usually use the exact same deck that I have been using since I learned tarot. So I know it very, very intimately. In my deck, the Nine of Pentacles is this figure, this, feminine figure in a rose garden with a falcon on her arm. And it's just this like peaceful, beautiful, serene scene. It feels luxurious. It feels quiet. And the figure comes across as very confident and secure in themselves. And I feel like that's the card that I most desire to embody and manifest in my life. Yeah.
We had talked about this the other day, but like every time I've gotten a reading, and it hasn't been much, but every time I always get the Death card. And that's my tarot to my sign, my sun's
Scorpio.
Sign. Yeah. Yeah. And I always get it. And it's so funny that it has such like a negative, like, I guess folks that like are not really into tarot or whatever, or like see that. And like, even in like movies and stuff, I always feel like people are like, the Death card. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like actually quite like a beautiful, profound, and scary, can be scary card. But I think it just represents like changes or transition and like starting anew. It's so weird. It always comes up for me. I want you to do a tarot for me, but you're like, don't really like doing it for your friends.
It's hella intimate.
Yeah.
It's very intimate. Sometimes I know things that I don't want to know about people.
I'm going to tell you things you don't want to know about me every day. I come into the shop telling you things but I guess it's like different because I still like to keep this air of like cold and aloofness and mystery.
How do you feel about the Death card? Tell me about that.
I mean, I've gotten it like every time I've done a reading, even for myself. The last time I did a reading actually was just before my dad passed, my partner at the time. And they were like, okay, like, let's just see what's going to happen. Like, let's see where you're at, whatever. Like, let's just pull some cards. And we did. And it even came up for that too. And then two other cards. I can't remember what it was, but she had told me to keep it in my wallet for like protection or whatever the case was. It wasn't like the reading was like, oh, he's going to get better and he's going to heal. It's kind of just like to protect me about whatever changes are going to happen. And I wish I remember. I took a picture of them. Yeah, that was the last time I did a reading. And I feel like after that, I felt a little, I knew that the card wasn't there to like protect anything, but I felt a little bit like betrayed in a sense. And then just a little like put off of it. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to, I don't know. It just disconnected myself from a lot of things. But I want to do another one now. I feel like I'm in a different place. And, in terms of like that card for me, I do feel like as like a person, I'm constantly in like a state of self-reflection. I'm like always thinking about the ways that I engage with other people, how I engage with the world, how I think about myself, like how I'm thinking in general. And, I got to a point in my life where I stopped sort of rejecting change and accepting that things do change and not everything is like a negative. I think once I found more stability and like my personal life, like in a home, like finding an apartment and like being stable there and like feeling really grounded in my tattooing, that I started to accept change as like an inevitable thing that happens. And like also like don't necessarily see like change as like a death to something. It's like something to think like a time period or a person that I was and still very much am. Evolve is kind of a big word that I feel like not degrades, but kind of like dismisses like the person that brought you to where you are now. So I feel like, yeah, like that card was coming up a lot during a time that was like kind of precarious and like constantly evolving. And I'm curious to know whatever readings I would get next, what would come up again. If it's another fucking death card, I'm gonna just be like, all right, so perpetually I'm gonna wear it on a necklace. Just like, but yeah, something light, airy, and fun. Since we're talking tarot, and I feel like astrology really ties into all of that, what is your top 3? I know them, but what's your top 3?
My top 3. So you mean my big 3, like in my chart?
Yeah.
I am a Leo sun. Yeah. I am a Cap rising and a Cancer moon.
I like all 3 of those signs. I've never had an issue with any of those. I feel like, okay, somebody that I know said something in their story the other day that I thought was so funny. And they were like, my favorite thing to do is ask somebody what their big 3 is and then go, oh, like it's a negative thing, but really has no opinions on it whatsoever.
Yeah.
Just make that person feel like, oh, what's wrong? Make them
sweat a little?
Yeah, yeah. And I was like, LOL, because I feel like that's like every sign. Every sign, somebody's like, oh,
you're one of the, that explains
it. I feel like as a Scorpio, you know, like the most polarizing of the signs, apparently, or at least I feel that way. Everyone's always like, yeah, you give big Scorpio energy. Although I have a lot of Scorpio placements in like my houses and planets. So yeah.
Tell us about it. Tell me about it.
It's a lot.
It's all.
Yeah, we were chatting, I think the other day about Scorpio season, and I thought it was supposed to be sexy and whorish. And just all of us are just going through transitional, very emotional, heightened states of reflection and like, I was lied to. But yeah, I love being a Scorpio. It's great. People want me or people want me and then hate me because they want me. You're a Leo though. I feel like you have the same arrogance.
Arrogance?
No, just self-confidence.
Yeah, maybe arrogance. I don't know.
Leos are supposed to feel like they're that bitch, no?
I don't always feel like that bitch.
You look like that bitch all the time.
Well, thank you.
You look like that bitch right
now. A Leo can take a compliment.
Yeah, you do.
But sometimes a Leo also needs a little bit of validation.
Who validates you the most?
My dog.
Oh, Cheetah!
My dog.
Okay, well, let's get into the topic of the episode, which is creating boundaries. It's kind of a broad, overarching topic. I think that in this industry and the type of work that we do, and that's why, you know, I say that this topic would be so like best explored with you was because of like the type of tattooing practice that you do. And I feel like everybody in this space, including myself, there's like an ethic and we have particular values that like create a certain space for our clients where we are working with like a lot of marginalized folks. We ourselves are like marginalized folks, racially, class, all the things, you know, maddened folks. With that responsibility, like, I think there's just a way that we have to be super aware of how we're practicing, of ourselves, how we're feeling, and then how our clients are feeling. Like, it's just such like a larger responsibility that I feel like doesn't really happen in like the mainstream tattooing world with like the tap bros and shit. So yeah, I thought that we could explore some of that. What are things that you do before your appointment? You kind of talked about it, but before your appointments, what are things that you do to ground yourself? Because I imagine, and from what I know you, being grounded is really important. What are things that you do outside of showering like 17 times a day?
What do I do before my appointments? Before my tarot appointments, I make sure my morning routine is done. Like my physical needs are taken care of. I have my coffee, whatever. And then I kind of like sit in my room for like a minute. So I'll sit in my tarot room for a minute, kind of like get into that space, take up space in that room, light a candle, light my
Take up
incense.
space. That's an interesting thing.
Yeah, like being physically present in that location, kind of, and not only being present in my head, but being physically present to the place. So scent, like lighting incense, for example, scent kind of helps me to be more physically present. And then I jump right into my calls once I find that I'm in the right headspace. For tattooing, I think making sure I have a good ride down to the shop is important. So some days that's like playing really like chill music. Some days that's playing soca music on my drive in.
Big mood.
Some days that's, you know, listening to an audiobook that I'm really engrossed in at the time. That looks different, but just making sure like I have like that's a long period of time too. It's like a 40-minute.
Yeah, you come from Scarborough, girl.
Yes, it's like at minimum 40 minutes. So I need to make sure that for that 40-minute time period, I'm in a good place, and that kind of like sets the stage for the rest of my appointments that day. I come in, I make sure I'm not super rushed. I usually, if I'm in first, I honestly don't usually put on music.
No, I'm the same. It's dead quiet.
Yeah, I usually don't put on the music until the client comes in and there's like awkward silence. And then I'll be like, hey, let me just throw something on. But yeah, like making sure my drives in are great, and then giving myself a bit of a buffer period so that I'm not walking into an appointment. So I need to make sure that there's at least like a 30-minute, if not more. I usually aim for at least an hour between the moment I'm walking through that door and the moment I'm client facing, to also be physically present in the space, right? Like I need to be here in order to receive someone into the space.
I feel like what makes me feel grounded is like different. It could look different depending on like what the day is and what my needs are. Like sometimes a little bit of like, it feels like chaos, but like for other people, but like it's not chaos for me. Like a consult, like it's very easy. I've been doing it for so long. I kind of have like a good idea. I know how to like listen to the client. So I can literally do that while I'm driving and like that process. But like I started being a little bit more like, okay, like looking ahead of time, pulling out my Procreate, creating like the files and then pulling the references. And then a typical consult looks like that. Taking down notes, writing everything down, looking at like reference images, sending them some of those. And I can kind of gauge what folks need more attention and what folks kind of are like, yeah, you know, whatever. But for like getting ready for an appointment, it sounds so stupid, but I just realized like an integral part of my day is my water cup, drinking and having water with me at all times. And like I have like a morning routine that I like am down packed. It's like clockwork that I do every day, except for like even for days that I'm at the gym that just looks different than the other days. And then it's been like different. Like I used to be the first one at the shop all the time. And now we have another artist that is like, they're always at the shop earlier than me even. And I'm like, oh shit. But when I am here by myself, I do have like, I like to be alone. I like to like do the sweeping and whatever, set up like dead silence, or like maybe just watch a show or have a show in the background. Like I need noise stimulation, but like not music all the time. Sometimes just talking is enough. And just to like prep, set up the station, sit, and like you said, like being present in the space and just having those moments before people start to come in and you have to kind of be on. I'm also somebody that likes podcasts. So I listen to a lot of podcasts in my car, or some days I'm really happy and in a good mood and I'm like, yeah, I'm trying to jump and wave in my seat. So yeah. Like what are things you do to decompress after tattooing?
Shower.
Yeah.
First thing I do, like my drive home, usually by the time I'm going home, it's audiobooks. And as soon as I walk through the door, hi to my dog, hi to the husband, and I'm in the shower. Take off all my nasty tattoo clothes.
Yeah.
And like showers, I think that's my Cancer moon, man. Like showers are like a really magical place for me. Water, cleansing. I need that. And it almost like resets me for another chapter, which is like the nighttime portion of my day with my tiny family in my tiny house. And I'm no longer a tattooer at that point.
I'm Caribbean. You walk in, the first thing I do is take off all the outdoor clothes. All the outdoor clothes. I go into the bathroom, Usually I've eaten dinner here, or maybe I've made dinner. I brush my teeth, I floss, I do my face routine, and then I go into my bed. And I feel like that's clean. But now I'm like, I don't know. I have a friend who's like the same. They shower like 2 or 3 times a day. And then even how they shower. And then I was like, you're making me feel dirty. And I don't like this. But it sounds like for you, it's like less, not so much about being clean and more about like decompressing. Do you like baths?
I like baths, but they feel like more of a luxury. Also a time luxury. When I get in the bath, I don't get out for like at least at minimum an hour and a half.
Really? What do you do?
Sit.
Read? No.
Sometimes I read. I usually just sit.
Not with the thoughts. Sitting with the thoughts.
I try actually not to think. I just try to sit. And like, I feel like if there is one place where I can actually have an empty mind, it's in the bathtub.
Really? Because all I can think about when I'm in a bath is that I don't fit in this bath, and I don't know why the water keeps overflowing. Yeah, these bathtubs in these apartments are fat phobic as fuck. I love taking baths at my mom's house. She has a deep ass.
Ooh, nice.
Like the big ones where you could stretch out your leg. I'm a little tall too. Well, I'm not that tall, but I'm taller than you to like stretch out the legs and actually like have bubbles and like relax. Like going to an Airbnb with the bathtub is like the best, like top tier.
A nice bathtub is important. So we didn't have a bathtub in this house. And when it came time to redo that bathroom, I was like, we have to have a bathtub. It's
It was
mandatory.
like a stand-up shower or whatever?
It was just a stand-up shower. And I'm like, I don't know how people can just go on their whole life,
How you
just
live like
stand
that?
up. It's like, you need to immerse.
Just stand up under some water. Might as well be standing in the rain.
Right? Like, and so when I went bathtub shopping, I'm like, oh my gosh, there are so many shapes and sizes of bathtubs. Like, which is the one for me?
Oh my God, you making a decision? You making a decision? I opened a shop with you. I know. You take your time
Yes.
about the choices that you make.
Yes.
But you mentioned that when you get home, you're not a tattooer. And then in talking about like work-life balance and boundaries, what does that look like regarding your work when you get home? Like how much do you share with your partner? Like how much do you hold? Because those appointments are like very, like you said, could be pretty intensive, extensive, and intimate. Like what does it look like to like not be a tattooer when going home?
So I have to admit, it's not as clear of a boundary as I would like it to be all the time. You know, sometimes I get out of that shower and I'm like, damn, I have to finish this drawing tonight. And I'm like back in tattooer mode. And that absolutely happens sometimes, but at least I'm clean and I can go do my drawings. But I do like to communicate with my partner also just because it's like the two of us in the house. He also works a lot and works in the evenings and works at home and works always. So we usually try to like communicate and be like, okay, when are you going to be done work? Okay, when are you going to be done work? All right, I'll be done around this time. And then we'll meet up in the living room and we'll do something. Or we'll like, sometimes we just watch a show. Sometimes we play a game. Sometimes, you know, we'll have dinner at the dinner table. But we try to communicate like, okay, when are you going to take a break? Or when is it done? And I think with that, it also helps us to manage our expectations of each other, to know when is working time and when we can actually be present for each other and, you know, give attention to one another and the dog. When it comes to my readings, that's a little bit different. After a reading, I do sometimes feel physically tired. Like I do sometimes feel tired. The good thing with that is that I do almost all of my readings from home. I do them remotely. And by the time I'm finished, I usually have some time to myself before the husband gets home.
But what are like the hard boundaries that you're like, this is what I need to implement to navigate doing those readings, coming down from those readings, even like, and I know it'll look different, so you can give me those answers, but like, yeah, like what are the hard boundaries that you know? So like one of them, it feels like is to like shower and like clear your mind and things like that. Like what are those like boundaries look like for you when you're at home?
That's honestly actually an interesting question because I know I have hard boundaries, but I think sometimes they only feel like a hard boundary when they come up. And I'm like, no, that's a no.
Is there like days of the week that you're like, these days I'm not going to do tattoo stuff?
I do try to keep my weekends free of tattooing unless I know that if I know that it's gonna affect my schedule the following week, or if it's going to affect my schedule, or if I know that my husband isn't going to be home and like there's really nothing for me to do at home other than take a really long bath and then I'm bored, I might fill it in. But I usually try to keep my weekends open for myself. I do sometimes do design work, but I try not to be client facing on the weekend.
I cannot relate.
Yeah.
Like even owning a shop now. So like not only are you a tattoo artist, you're now like a business owner. You know, we have like much more responsibilities day to day, month to month. Like how do you navigate like those boundaries and like communicating with your partner, your business partner and like the artist or whatever, like what kind of boundaries do you create with that in running a shop?
Understanding those boundaries has been an organic process, as I think most boundaries for me are. It's kind of navigating those like fluidy fringe spaces where my needs kind of intersect with the needs of others. So sometimes those kind of areas and territories are kind of bumping up against each other, and we have to identify that they're there and what they are, and kind of like, although it can be fluid sometimes and sometimes it works to just let it be, sometimes we need to like kind of cut through them and define them a little bit more sharper edges, right? So that's been something that I think am keeping an eye out for, but there are some boundaries that have been defined so far. So for example, our communication agreement, the way that we agree to respond to each other, what expectations are being set for how prompt we are at addressing certain things, the ways in which we're addressing certain things, the times and places and ways in which we need to show up for each other, I think have started to become clearer and more defined. And I'm sure there's going to be ways in which we define those boundaries further.
Yeah. And I feel like as we go along, there's just like certain ways that like communication has been a little bit more, like I know for me, like I'll often be like, oh, there's this thing I have to ask Sam or that I need to know, but do I need to know it tonight? It's Friday night or it's Saturday. This can wait till Sunday or Monday. And I won't message about it because it's not a pressing thing. So I'm like, okay, I need like a minute. And I know that she probably needs a minute. And I feel like we both kind of like do that sort of thinking about. And like you said, we did a communications agreement because early on there was like, just conflicts in communication and boundary breaking, a lot of boundary breaking and like getting to know each other as individuals and as partners. And because the space isn't like primarily, it's not a capitalistic sort of space in the sense that like income making, instead it's about safety and community building, that we get to be more intentional with each other's feelings, with each other's lives, while also still maintaining particular kinds of boundaries and not to like have so much personal, like as we're building relationships, so much of like the personal relationship integrates so much into the business. At the same time, almost doing that, it's like this weird trying to find that balance of like, I care about you, you care about me. It's not just like we're making money together. It's like we're creating something here and we're showing care to each other that we wanted to receive being in the industry, while also trying to do that or doing that with our artists that work here as well. And even creating boundaries with the artists. Like we had a moment where we were like, why are we so destabilized? Like what isn't working here? Like what are we doing? And we realized that we were like really decentering ourselves from the space and what the core messaging and values were. And that we actually needed more from the artist to also help us to feel safer and help us to feel stabilized and to respect our boundaries. We had that conversation and folks have been like, yeah, of course, you know, and things have been better. And it's like, just like naming those things, those boundaries, those needs, those communication styles, and like developing, you know, protocols or whatever to hold us accountable to that. And just like having conversations with each other. And like you said, like everything's sort of happening organically. And that's something I need to learn. I'm always like, we need to figure it out now. And you're like, I don't think that you're like that, but you understand the importance and you understand urgency but you're a lot more chill than I am in some things.
Sometimes.
Yeah, and it's weird. It's weird. When we were building this space, there were things where you were like, no. And I was like, fuck it. Like, I don't care. Like, we can do whatever. But yeah, it definitely has been a process. And like again, take a shot every time we say boundaries, right? This is the episode.
This is the episode.
Yeah. Like just learning that and naming them as they come and having the space to be able to name them as they come to.
I think that's the important part about allowing things to be organic, is that as you are discovering things, it's important to have the space to name them. Yeah. Otherwise, it's just a shit show.
Yeah.
So if we're going to agree to allow ourselves the time and the space to organically come to these boundaries, we're going to also need the time and the space to be able to name them as we see them and discover them.
Yeah, it can't be like, well, this wasn't a problem before. Like, and even in like relationships and personal relationships, romantic relationships, there's often folks are like, well, this wasn't a problem before. Why is it a problem now? It's because, well, I didn't make the space, or maybe I didn't think about it. And there was something happening to my body that I didn't understand. And now it's important. Like, it's okay for that not to be important. It's also okay for the other person to be like, well, I'm just a little taken aback. Because I feel like sometimes when people break other people's boundaries, that defensiveness comes from like, wow, I actually, if they're like a, whatever, genuine person or whatever the case is, like, oh my God, I imposed on this person, or I hurt this person, and that was not my intentions. And now I've done this, but that's not who I am. And how do I navigate those feelings? And it just sometimes comes up as defensiveness. And that's something that I need to learn, is like, or that I've been learning, is that not everything is like an attack. And it's like, okay to name, oh, well, I was under this impression. And like, what was it about, what is it that you need? Or what was it about what I was doing or what's happening that we need to sort of reflect on and change to like respect the boundaries that you're naming now, or like name those boundaries as they come. Like somebody just being like, oh, I didn't like this and I don't like this and it makes me feel like this. Well, it's like, is this a boundary to be more confidential? Is it like how much space taking up? You know what I mean? Like just stuff like that.
Yeah.
Having the conversations, and we have a lot of conversations, even in our meetings, that take up a lot of time. But like over time, I think it's going to be less and less of those intense conversations. And equally, like what we're saying, they'll still come up as we grow as people. Yeah. The death card, ever changing.
They're usually not the easiest conversations.
No.
And I think that sometimes what it can hit on are the very tricky feelings of, number one, guilt and shame. And those two in themselves are very destabilizing emotions, right?
Yeah.
So when those are coming up for us as a person, maybe we feel guilty that we unintentionally or unknowingly hurt someone that we care about. We might feel ashamed that we didn't know better.
Yeah.
And as that's coming up, it's like, oh my God, no, and then the defensiveness comes out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right? And so like that's something even to be a little bit mindful of, and watching that as it's occurring in ourselves.
Yeah, I think that when we did our communications agreement, part of that was we did some, and with the artists too, in writing that memorandum, but like as business owners, our partners agreement, where we talked about our communications and how some things like give us a visceral reaction and how we might react to things, or like how we have conversations, how we might have a conversation, the sort of feelings that it comes up, right? So like, so like some of us are like, we need a little bit of space. Like hearing something like guilt brings us to needing some space, or hurt brings us to da-da-da. We do a lot of reflecting in this bitch.
Yeah.
A lot. We ask the hard questions, but I feel like it works in the long run, and not something that you often experience in a workplace. It could feel like a lot in the moments of like creating these protocols. Is such an word, but like in the lack of a better word, but like on a day to day, it's like great. And then when conflict comes up or these things come up, we're like, okay, let's refer back to this. We work with like primarily marginalized communities, like queer, trans, Black, brown, like racialized folks, primarily because we are like all those things as well. And because of our values, and then just like our tattooing styles and ethics and practices, that's just like seems to be our main clientele. I mean, even before like primarily working with those communities, like tattooing in general, I feel like folks use that as an opportunity for healing. And I do think that there's a bit of a difference. Like when my clientele was primarily like when I was in street shops and just like taking in whatever, like people always use it as healing. Folks are always like wanting to vent or talk about personal things that are going on. And it could feel boundary breaking for sure. But I bring up the more marginalized, and I feel like there is a difference in like working with folks who like closely relate to our experiences, that sometimes those conversations can feel a little bit more activating, but also affirming, like could be mutually healing and like a really great experience. But also because things just hit so close to home, it could just be like a lot to absorb. Maybe not prepared in the day. Maybe we didn't do our morning ritual, or it's just like a day that we just feel like we just can't handle it. So like, what are like important boundaries that you as an artist like to maintain with your clients? I don't do DMs. That's like a hard boundary for me right now, because the overly accessible, hyper visible, like it's too much. And I was getting DMs at 3:00 in the morning, 1:00 in the morning, 6, 8 messages back to back to back. I'm not answering on time. It's 7:00 in the morning. And it's like, well, you don't want my business. And it's like, just because it's a DM doesn't mean that you have the right to access me at whatever time. Mm-hmm. And so I felt like that's my big boundary. I don't do DMs. I try to engage with like my followers and my clients as much as possible with like story replies or whatever. But I like needed to hire an assistant, and I keep everything to email. Yeah. Everything gets referred back to email, because and then I don't get clouded or judged by maybe the way that they don't know how to communicate what they need in a DM or like in a message. And I get to just get them prepared, and I get to prepare myself, and I don't need to feel activated because I'm getting a fucking DM at 12:30 and I'm like, who the fuck emails anybody after 10 p.m.? It's inappropriate, you know? But that's like a boundary I have with my clients, mm-hmm. like even before we start tattooing.
Yeah, I totally hear that. And I think I think for me, it's still not a hard boundary, but I also feel that it's that way because most people already know not to DM me.
And I'm gonna text you. I'm gonna WhatsApp you if I need a real response. Yeah, a fast one.
Yeah, I mean, like you know, I'm never even on Instagram. I think maybe that's why people also don't think to DM me, because they already see I'm never freaking active on Instagram.
You're never online.
They're like, she's not here, so why talk to her?
Do your like weekly story posts?
Weekly, monthly, whenever I get around to it. Whenever I feel like, oh shoot, like I better, still be present publicly.
But what, like during your appointments or like things
during my appointments. So yeah, the DM thing is kind of, I guess, like a boundary that's there, but doesn't really need to be enforced as much for me, because I also have started working with an assistant. The emailing stuff was, I think, a boundary for me, because I saw all of my colleagues, I saw all these tattooers like being able to like just juggle administration with drawing, with designing, with tattooing, and I couldn't do it. When I saw an email come through, I would be like, I'm not opening that. And that's not how you run a business. So that was a boundary. I'm like, I'm home, I'm relaxing, I'm not opening this email. And I would resist it. Until I was ready to like open all the emails. And then there would be things that were not responded to in a timely manner. So because I noticed that boundary in myself is one of the reasons why I needed an assistant to kind of manage that for me and be a little bit more regular with that for me.
In terms of like clients who like folks who come, and because again with like your practice, I know that you're kind of quiet during your appointments too.
Yeah.
So maybe there are maybe the boundary is silent.
I feel like my boundaries, a lot of times I'm lucky that I sort of feel like it speaks for itself. But I do give my clients some boundaries, and I let them know that I'm aware of their boundaries, especially when I'm starting a consultation with them. So that's usually the first time we're actually talking to each other. So when we're sitting down for a consultation, and I'll always tell my clients, especially in the context of readings, because things can get very intimate, very touchy, very in-depth. And I tell them, you're welcome to share as much or as little as you like, and you're not required to share anything or divulge any information that feels private or personal or even just off limits for today, and you can let me know that and redirect me. But at the very same on the same note, like I'm there to hold space for whatever is coming through at this time.
Do you think that there's ever folks that like had a reading with you that got really intense? Do you feel like anybody come to those appointments and feel like, oh my God, like awkward or
100%.
uncomfortable? Yeah.
100%. I know that there are people that come through and although they're like, yeah, I'm really excited, like I can tell like you're nervous or like, or sometimes it's like their first time and they're like, I'm curious, but I've also heard really weird stories of, fortune tellers and stuff like that.
Not the crystal ball.
Someone told my mom that like their daughter was gonna fall off, like weird stuff, right? And so, there's always like, well, not always, but there's many times, especially for folks who are having a reading for the first time, a little bit of nerves, and that's okay.
You also have clients that are like, I fucking love getting tattooed. Like we have clients that we all share and they come and they're high energy and it's just like regular tattoo appointment that doesn't feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, but I think that even in that first point of contact where we are, getting to know each other, we do talk a little bit about boundaries. And I think that that also sets the stage for when we meet in person or any other communications that we're going to have at that time or after that moment. And I feel like I have to think about boundaries a little bit less because we've already talked about it.
I don't think I've had any super boundary breaking clientele. I feel like really good clients. Not that they would be bad clients, but that like clients that are like really intentional with the way that they share their stories. I have folks that will start a story and go, oh, wait, is this okay that I'm going to talk about this? And ask me. And then if there's like a lot of people in the shop or something, and I feel like the conversation might be a little bit more triggering or activating, I might go, yeah, but let's try to like be careful with the way that we talk about it. Like, maybe instances of like sexual violence or whatever, or like things that are like related to trauma. I'm okay to talk about these things. It's how people talk about it. And if they are being attentive to how I might be reacting or how I might react to what they're saying, equally, I'll do the same thing and ask them what they're comfortable in sharing. And if I ask a question, I'll be like, feel free to not want to answer it. Like, that's okay. I've also just like in like exploring or understanding being neurodivergent more, realizing that there are times when I need to like hyper mask and I don't really love that. So I can't mask the way that I used to as easily before. So there's times when I'm super present with my clients. And there are times when I like need to disconnect with like a podcast. Like I'll have one headphone in and I'll be like, you can talk though, and I could take it out or I can pause it. Like feel free to do whatever we want to do during this appointment. But I just want to zone out a little bit, which is like starting to be a boundary for me. And I'm trying to figure out how to incorporate that in like the preemptive process before they get into the chair. Like what sort of conversations will I have with them to let them know how I'm feeling that day? Things were happening with us last week that were high stress. I had a conversation with clients and I was like, hey, like, just so you know, kind of having a day and I'm present with you and I'm excited. I'm just might not be as like my upbeat. And I think it goes into like social media too. And that was another question I was going to ask, where folks see like freaking 2% of your life. And anything I post, I'm like, well, and it's like jokey and fun and whatever, or like I'm ranting about something, but in like a goofy way. So I often get DMs where people are like, I'm so excited to meet you. You're so funny. You're so, and I'm like, not always.
Yeah.
And, and then there's like this high expectation. It feels like there's a high expectation for me to perform. We're just like, I'm not always in that place to perform. So like having those conversations and creating those sort of boundaries with clients and being like, this is where I'm at today. Where are you at today? And like feeling the energy of the client. Because some clients you can tell who want to be more quiet. I love that. Oh my God. I do. I love a chatty client, but I love a quiet client where they're like listening to their headphones and I'm like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
This is it.
Yeah.
I could just draw on you.
That's how I feel. Yeah. And also I've noticed, I'm so in my zone. I'm very unaware of my surroundings, but every so often I'll notice, I think today I even heard you or overheard you saying to your client, I'm just going to pop in a headphone, but I'm here for you. Let me know if whatsoever. I didn't hear the full conversation.
Yeah.
And I thought like, that's really cool. Like, that's really cool that you can like give yourself your own little bubble. Of course, being responsible and being present to your client's needs. But that's an interesting way to work as well.
I worked in street shops, so long, and I do conventions, and I could work fast-paced, high energy spaces. And I did that, I've been tattooing for quite a bit of time, and I did all that. And I've just gotten to a place where like now I want to like center my art and like center creating this space and center myself too a little bit. Because I feel like with street shops and with any service industry, everything's about the client, and it should be. It is so intimate. You talked about breaking skin, right? Like that is such an intimate, ritualistic sort of practice that we're doing, right? And we're ourselves trying to decolonize tattooing in whatever ways that looks like. But like that also means that I require some space in the same way, we mentioned with the artists also centering us for safety in our own, what we need for safety with our clients too, and creating those boundaries and being like, I have needs too. And I've been doing this for too long and I need to feel good too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like, that's just another way of maybe decolonizing and reimagining even what customer service looks like. Customer service doesn't have to look like you putting on a mask and jumping up and down because the client said so. Customer service can also be you providing care to a person, being mindful of their needs, being mindful of their boundaries, being mindful of their body, and still, having your own space to be human.
Yeah, because again, as we're like breaking skin, it's like an energy exchange. And I don't want to like be in a bad, heightened state while tattooing somebody. I don't want to put that energy into them because that's what it feels like. I don't want to, like when a client gets squirmish or like hard, a little bit difficult to tattoo, I don't like getting frustrated and angry with them. I'm like, I have to check myself and be like, whoa, what's happening here? And I have to reframe it like this person's in pain, but it's making it difficult for me and I don't want to disappoint them. I don't want to feel that like guilt and like, so what do I need to do? Maybe I pop in a headphone. Maybe we take a break, like maybe we drink some tea or eat some food and like maybe we like stop and have a conversation because I just don't want to like put that energy in them because they're experiencing something in that moment. Do you find it difficult to create when you feel destabilized? Like as an artist, do you find it difficult?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, even if it's just like creating a little flash, which I rarely even have the time to do.
Right? But jeez.
Like when last I create flash?
A long time ago. Last year, maybe?
The last flash day. That was like the first and last time I made flash in ages, man. But it was nice. It was
beautiful.
Rewarding. Yeah, it was rewarding. Even flash comes a little bit easier because you get to kind of just flow with whatever, but creating custom work, getting into the creative zone to not only do what you want to do, but to consider the other person and then to consider the reading and to consider all of these things. And I need to do the intuitive custom work. I need to be stabilized.
Well, yeah.
Luckily.
Yeah. You have a bathtub.
Yeah, I have. Luckily, I have some tools. I mean, there have been times where I'm like, I'm going to have to put this off. I'm going to have to shift my schedule. And it happens.
Yeah.
But I need to get stabilized. I need to feel good, at least grounded. Sometimes you don't always feel good, but I need to always feel grounded and present when I'm going to be creating something, particularly my intuitive custom pieces. Yeah. And I need to find a way to get there.
With our line of work, social media is such a fucking important motherfucking thing that we need to do. It's destabilizing. It's been good for some ways. It's been affirming. It's like such a great way to like network with other artists. I've got to meet people around the world that I would have never met before. Get to connect with clients even in a different way, and not everybody that gets tattooed by me right away, but that, I get to engage in like really cool conversations with and like, build relationships and be affirmed with my art, and also see what other people are doing and get inspired. But those parasocial relationships, it becomes too much. and I've had to learn to like disconnect, and I feel like I'm still kind of navigating that. How do you do?
I don't do.
Yeah, you don't do. You do not. You won't even download TikTok like that.
I don't have TikTok. No, I have Instagram. I kind of use it a little bit more like a calling card. Like if you need me, click this link.
Not impossible.
I don't use it in the typical social way. And that's just me. That's me.
Is that like social media? That's a boundary. Like that, it's just like a world that can be beautiful in some ways, but like super toxic. And that you've just chosen to like disconnect that way.
Yeah, it's a boundary, but I'm still there.
Yeah.
So is it really a boundary? I don't know. But the amount of time that I can put into it and the amount of attention. And I think the attention and the time are two different things, because sometimes you're thinking about social media and you're not even on your phone.
Not the shop living on TikTok. Like, you out of the loop. We're literally here like, oh no, my table is broken. And you're like,
I got left behind somewhere.
You're like, I don't know what y'all talking about, but you're doing a lot.
I got left behind, man. Again, because I need to be grounded in order to function, in order to do the work that I have agreed to do for people. I cannot be destabilized in the way that a social media makes me feel destabilized.
Oh.
So that's something I can't participate in, unfortunately.
That sounds like a boundary.
And I knew that with the type of work that I was going to be getting into. I remember actually recently recalling a conversation that I had with my husband. We weren't married at the time. And he thought it was a great idea. Like, yeah, tattooing, that sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
Tarot, oh my God, yeah, do it. And I like literally had to have a very serious conversation and tell him like, tarot isn't for me. Tarot isn't something that I can just pick up and do like a regular day job. I don't just go in, do the thing, and leave. Like, I need to be in a different state of mind.
You're not like practicing capitalism in the same way.
No, it's not a check-in, check-out. And I explained, and I knew this when I was getting into it. And I even had to question whether this was going to be the path for me because of how much I knew it would require of me. And I told him, I'm like, I cannot live my life in the same way. And there's going to be certain things that I just will not be able to do, and ways that I will not be able to engage with you sometimes. Do you understand that?
How did he?
Yeah. And he was supportive, even though he had no idea what I was talking about. He didn't know what it meant. I think even now, sometimes it's surprising to see the ways that what it's like living with a tarot reader artist. Like, wow, this is an interesting life. Like, and so yeah, like I always knew there was going to be things and ways in which I can't move the same way that my colleagues move. And that's just because of, like, I would even just chalk it up to the tarot aspect of my work and the intuitive aspect of my work. In order to be able to do that, I need to be in a certain state of mind. And in order to be in a certain state of mind, I need to do and not do certain things.
I have two more questions. What is something that you're excited about with your practice, or what is something that is fulfilling you right now? Because we're talking about being stabilized and things like that and boundaries. What is something that's happening that's fulfilling you, that is like filling your cup to be able to come back to your practice or engage in your practice in ways that you need to be?
I am going to be taking a trip to Guyana next week. I mean, I don't want to put too much pressure on myself, but I'm hoping, and I think that the intention that I'm setting for that trip is to establish a fuller sense of root and home and heritage and some root chakra healing, you know. And I am hoping, and there's a very high likelihood that this may not come to be, but I'm hoping that some really great art could come out of that, and that I could be inspired in a way that is for myself and not only for others. So something that I'm noticing with my work, which is part of why I love my work, but I mean, a lot of what I do is for other people. A lot of the art that I create is for
like talking about the flash is like, you're not creating flash, or like art that doesn't need to be monetized.
Art that doesn't need to be monetized, and art that isn't it's almost like the client is like looking over my shoulder when I'm creating the art, because I know that they're the ultimate audience and there's an audience for this art before the art is even created, right?
Right.
And so I would like to be able to create something just for creativity, just because of inspiration, just because I'm feeling good. And then whoever sees it, or whoever doesn't get to see it, doesn't get to see it. So that's something that I'm looking forward to.
I feel like I relate to that. Yeah. I'm definitely in this place where I need to start creating like a disconnect from monetization and art and like to create things. However, I do feel like it's not been as bad because I'm starting to do the tattoos that I want to be doing. Clients are now coming to me because of what I can create and not necessarily like that street style aspect of like pumping out a solid tattoo in the ways that the client wants. And then I'm getting clients that are allowing me artistic freedom. So that in a way it does feel like I am creating for me as well. And I think that, something that I'm excited about, though, outside of tattooing that will fulfill me is the things that we want to do with the shop is more community building, developing workshops, honestly, training apprentices, getting other people involved in the industry, like things like that. I really enjoy this podcast. Things like, I don't know, that I get to explore other aspects of myself where I could just become a better tattooer and a better artist because I'm getting fulfilled in other places. What is a good piece of advice or a piece of advice that you received or something that you want to share when entering the industry in regards to boundary making?
I'm recalling a conversation that we had where we were talking about protecting your love for tattooing.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And like safeguarding that shit, like making sure that like you are taking care of it and you're treasuring not just the tattooing, but your love and your relationship with it. I don't even know what that is fully, but I know there's some truth in there.
Yeah, that hits something.
Right?
It is important. It is so important. And I think that's why the conversations around boundaries is important, and changing and decolonizing and like shifting what it means to practice this art, right? Because so quickly it could become so mechanical. You lose yourself and you lose it and you lose why you came into it. And that could happen for so many reasons. It can happen, during an apprenticeship. It can happen while you get started. You do a couple bad tattoos, your fucking day, your week, your month is ruined. Like things that you're not happy with over things that could have been avoided or that you feel like could have been avoided, but also giving yourself space to like know that you're always constantly learning and growing. And a lot of these things you're going to figure out as they come, and realizing that a bad tattoo or a tattoo that you feel like is bad is not a defining moment and it doesn't define who you are as an artist. It doesn't define your capacity or your capabilities. It's like, love what you do. Yeah, tattoos are becoming more modernized and more within the mainstream. It's like, whatever, fuck all that shit. I love the shit that folks are doing right now to incorporate like such important ethics and values and like get back to the root of like what is important. And it's creating art. It's connecting with the clients, with yourself, and just like realizing that you're doing something that you love. Right? So yeah, I think that is a really good piece of advice. Don't spread yourself too thin.
Yeah.
Well, Sam, thank you for staying later.
We're staying later.
We're staying later in our space.
In our own shop.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for being here today. But yeah, thank you for talking about this and like sharing so much of what you've learned, your practice. And you just said something, you like left me flabbergasted. I wasn't speechless. So I'm like, yeah, you hit the nail on the head every time, I feel like. So thank you for having this conversation with me. Is there anything you want to plug?
Okay, so I'm writing a handbook right now with a couple of my partners in a nonprofit that I'm working with called Vaxana. And we're writing a handbook it's really centered around the tools that one can use, emotional tools that one can use when engaging in work that is I guess, self-identified as disruptive or radical work. And it really talks a little bit about boundaries, about walking the line that can be created and we can feel within ourselves of polarizing feelings. For example, when we're feeling both hope and despair at the same time in the work that we're doing and the activities that we're engaging in. So that book hopefully is going to be released maybe by the end of this year if we get everything together.
I'm excited for that. Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll be doing a lot more work as well in Guyana. So that's another thing that I'm looking forward to in the trip that I'm going for. And
folks can follow you.
You can find me on Instagram. Again, I am barely ever there, but I'm there. You can find me at sam.daveena. You can find our nonprofit work at vaksana.advp.
How do you spell that?
VAKSANA.ADVP.
We'll make sure to plug in all that. I know I just had you spell it out, but we'll make sure to plug out those Instagrams, those projects, all within the description on the podcast or on whatever streaming platform that folks are listening to. So thanks.
Thank you.
That's it for today's episode, folks. Go ahead and follow at the Teardown Pod on all socials. Make sure to leave a rating and review wherever you get your podcasts. The Teardown is hosted by me, Vegas Inc. This episode was edited and mixed by Ali Sirois and produced in collaboration with Edit Audio. And I'll see y'all at our next session.